Hello and welcome to another new video on the channel. Today we're going to be racing around Anglesey in North Wales for the Race of Remembrance charity event. We had some pretty good moments all in all, and as you're going to see later on in the video, some not good moments, but that all comes with endurance racing. Today was my first ever sort of endurance race, my first experience of endurance racing. After qualifying, we qualified a strong P2. And we were looking really good going into the race as we were only 2/10 off the pole time, even on some knackered old tyres. Over 10 laps I knew that I was going to be more consistent than the other guys, as we'd proven during the testing. So over the 12-hour endurance, it does make up a lot of difference being just that little bit more consistent. So going into the race, it's safe to say we had our eyes fixed on a pretty decent result considering the testing and the qualifying proven beforehand. Just before the race, I managed to secure a decent little interview with Alpha Live. So not only did I have to deal with the pre-race nerves, I also had to deal with making myself not look like an idiot in front of hundreds of people. So before I get into it, I just need to explain a couple of things about the race. Split up into 3 parts to make sure there's no chance of exhaustion and to have a minute silence on Remembrance Day. It's also split over 2 days, part 1 being on 3 PM on Saturday and parts 2 and 3 on Sunday. So, without further ado, let's jump into the race. So, to elaborate further, we qualified P2 in class, not overall. We were starting 14th overall until we got a penalty for whatever reason that put us down in 27th. Bit annoying, I know, but on the formation lap, I just had to get my head down. It was going to be a long race, so I just thought about getting some temperature into the tyres. And here we go, ready for the start of the 12-hour endurance. Didn't really want to do anything stupid straight away, but the guy on the right hand side of me got a really good run going around T1. Didn't really fancy giving up the position to him because he was a little bit slower than us, so I managed to get by this mini and go around the outside of the other Mazda going into the bank turn 2. This first hour was mainly spent just making up our lost ground after qualifying, and we came across a lot of slower cars, so we just needed to get by them as quickly as possible if we wanted any chance of sticking with the leaders. It was going to be a long race, so clean and calculated moves was the way forward. Coming towards the end of my stint, I put us in a really good position, 14th overall and 2nd in class, but the safety car came out. I think it was time for a driver swap at this point, and it was a really good opportunity to take, because it would mean that we would lose a lot less time than we normally would do, as the cars are going about a quarter of their normal speed. So, here comes Dan. Dan was the other driver I was sharing the car with this weekend during the 12-hour endurance, and to be fair to him, he was actually really handy behind the wheel. As you can see on the safety car restart, diving up the inside into turn 1 on another Mazda for position. But as we jumped into the 2nd hour of the race, you can visually see it's got a lot darker, and the vision is a lot more impaired due to the sun setting. And unfortunately we came across our first problem of the race. The engine got so hot during the race that it managed to burn through the lead, connecting to the main light on the bonnet of the car. So Dan unfortunately couldn't see anything, and we had to come straight in. For something as so little as a light cable, it took ages to repair. We lost 40 minutes during that pit stop, and we got lapped several times by people in the same class as us. We lost about 15 laps to the people in class in total. So if we wanted to salvage a podium, we had to get moving straight away. But not even 50 minutes after the pit stop, this happened. Going through the last corner of the lap, we suffered a little bit of contact due to the car on the outside turning into us. The car felt fine, however, and we just carried on as usual. It was only 2 laps later at the exact same spot where our problem started to unravel. If you couldn't tell by the video, the gearbox, for a lack of a better word, completely shat itself. We concluded that, because of the earlier contact, it must have been a direct link for the gearbox failing. By the time the car was recovered and taken back to the garage, we'd lost another hour, into hour 5 now. The guys had got to work putting the gearbox back together, but because of this, we could say our race really became undone here. After 2 hours of repairs in the garage, We finally got back out on track, but we were in the last 50 minutes of the race. My goal was to not make any time up and not stress the car out too much, but to simply to make it to the end of this part of the race, and we can regroup and go again tomorrow. It was a tough pill to swallow, knowing that realistically our chances weren't very good at winning the race or even getting on the podium, but crazier things had happened before. It was definitely frustrating, considering the pace we had, that this had happened, but it's all part of the sport.
It's shake and bake time.
Shake and bake, buddy!
So, it's the start of a new day, and that also means a fresh start. At this point in time, we're 49th overall and 11th in class, 15 laps down on the nearest car. Our goal was to make at least into the top 10, which, considering the gap, was going to be quite a tough effort. But to do so, we had to stay out of trouble by any means necessary. If you've made it this far into the video, I really appreciate it. I would also recommend you subscribing if you're interested, because I'm going to be posting more Ferrari content in the future. So yeah, make sure you stay tuned for that. With the race back underway, if we want to move up position in class, we've got to make up as much time up as possible. Because there's so much traffic at these early laps at the start of any race, there's a lot of time to be made up. So as you can see here, we're not messing about and getting through the pack as quickly as we possibly can. Looking up the inside of the guy in front of us into turn 3 there. Cutting on to the next lap now, we're going to the left hand side to go round the outside of these two cars. We make one of the moves stick, but coming out of turn 2 here, they're going 4 wide and I back off, just trying to not make an incident happen, and then we take our time and just go round the outside of these two cars as we've got a little bit more poke in a straight line, and getting these two cars under the brakes, going into the hairpin at the very top of the hill, just to make sure we're not losing any time through these squiggly bits. We've made a load of progress and skipping on an hour into hour 9 now. It's come towards the end of my stint. We've gained about 3 laps on the car in front in class, which is really indicative of our pace. It's quite a shame that we're this far back, as we could easily be fighting for the class win by this point. But if we can do the best we can out of the situation we're in, we can leave with our heads held high. I'm coming into the pits now for another driver swap, as you can only do so many hours in a row, and my time is evidently coming to an end. As I was saying earlier, the ground we were making up is really strong. We were about 5 seconds a lap quicker than the people in front of us, and it was the same for when Dan hopped into the car as well. This part of the race was really short, however, and it came to quite an abrupt end as the safety car was brought out, and that's how we finished.
Sometimes you just got to lick the stamp and send it, so...
Headed straight into the third part and final part of this race. As Dan finished the second part, he had to start the third part. We knew we could gain a lot of time on these guys in front of us in class, so it was only a matter of time until we fought with them for position. So Dan just kept putting in some consistent laps together and just ended up taking little chunks away from them lap by lap. However, as I'm pretty sure you've realised by now, during the driver change between the part 2 and the part 3, the camera's been tilted up and knocked by one of the mechanics most likely. I didn't even notice it whilst doing the driver swap, so as I went back out for my last sort of stint before the end of the race, the camera was still fixed up in an upright position, so I do apologise about that. Heading into the 11th hour, due to our pace and some unfortunate circumstances for others, we've caught right up to the back of the guy in front of us in class. Still a lap down by this point, but if we can overtake him here, which we luckily enough are able to do so because I've saved my tyres and my brake pads, we are now only less than a lap behind him from overtaking him in place and getting P10 on the board. Only a few laps later though, our progress was cut short by a crane on the track bringing out the safety car as they were trying to recover a vehicle. I knew that with only just over an hour to go, we didn't have a lot of time to be making up 50 seconds on the car in front, which was what the delta was at this point in time. So, especially at the restart where there was a lot of traffic, it was going to be really tricky to put in some consistently fast laps to make sure that we could catch him enough in time to make sure that we could overtake in class. By hour 12 we were that fast, we were only 20 seconds behind the car in front in class, and we were knocking on the door of coming inside the top 10 if everything was going our way. Fortunately enough, there were some cars who actually had to retire due to engine issues in our class, so by this point we were actually battling for 8th place, which was far beyond what we were expecting going into today, considering how many laps we were behind. It was all looking really promising, but a little while later, the problems we had earlier resurfaced. With only 10 minutes to go, it was heartbreaking to know that the diff had gone on the car, resulting from the earlier accident, and was overlooked during the repair job. With not enough time to repair the car, it would sadly mean that this was the end to our race. I can't thank the guys at Porsche and FF Corsa enough for doing such an amazing job repairing the car and keeping it going for as long as it did. Despite the result, I thoroughly enjoyed my first sort of taste of endurance racing, and I'll happily be back in the future. Thank you all for sticking around to the end of this video, and I'll see you next time.